Hello, everybody. Yeah. We'll do it one more time that everybody's paying attention. Hello. Hey. I was smiling because I realized you're all such diligent students. Everyone was quieting down and came up to like a teacher again. My goodness. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Darren St. George. I'm the director of the Southold Historical Museum, and it's hard to believe, but this is our final lecture of our winter series. Just curious show of hands, who attended previous lectures with us? Okay, fantastic. And whose first time is this? A handful. Welcome to the party. Everybody else, welcome back. I hope we do this again next year. I've been enjoying it. Would you like to see it again?
Yeah.
Yes, we'll find some more lecturers and continue. And it seems like there's a lot more maritime history to explore. So maybe we'll continue to pursue that theme. I wanted to go over a few things. As always, I want to thank the board of the Southold Historical Museum, the incredible staff who put all of this together for us, all the volunteers who assist in assembling these types of programs, as well as the Horton Point Lighthouse volunteers who are responsible for all of the delicious treats we have waiting for us after this program. So thank you, everybody. Yes, I know we're excited to get to Jeremy and Sally. They're waiting in the wings so everybody can see them. But I just want to go a few things. If you aren't aware, we have a lot going on. So even next week, we have a lot happening. We have our burger and beer fundraiser over at the Greenport Harbor Brewery. Yep, I see a few people nodding. Just come on down. Wednesday night, buy a burger, drink a beer, and it helps the museum. It's amazing. Love it. On Thursday night, right here, same place, we're going to have our dessert and discussion. We're talking about the budget vote. Has everybody heard the museum is on the budget vote this year? Okay, well, that's what we're going to be talking about. If you have questions, we're hoping this is a great way to help support the museum, and we want to talk about it. And of course, we'll have more treats, desserts, has to happen. That Saturday is a private event, but I'd like to boast a little bit. The Southold Historical Museum, we are hosting the Long Island Historical Societies on Saturday, and we're giving them a tour of the Maple Lane campus, the Horton Point Lighthouse, and the Prince Building. It's our chance to show off. They're going to come around, tour the grounds, and yeah, just proud of it. So LIHS is going to be here in Southold. We also have kicking off our we have Step Back in History for our schools for the Southold School District that begins May 14th. Every student that goes to the school in Southold gets to visit the property each year. You learn different things about our history, our heritage, where we came from, how we got here today, and that begins on May 14th. We open our grounds on May 22nd, and we're going to kick off the season with line dancing in the record barn right over there, I believe. Am I right? That's the barn? That's the barn. Right over there. If you haven't participated in line dancing, it's a lot of fun. Lady T hosts it with us. She was so popular, Halleckville is going to pick her up as well. Line dancing is growing in Southold. It's popular. Yeah, she's great. And she's perfect for new dancers or veterans. And then there we go. I think those are everything we have going on. If anyone is viewing us on Zoom, please feel free. We want to hear your comments. Add them into the chat, and we'll answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation. But I think you've heard enough about me. I turn it over to Women Who Keep the Light On with Sally and Jeremy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I was just remembering I brought a group tour, a U.S. Lighthouse Society group tour to your area in 2023, and we went to Horton Point Lighthouse. Only time I've been around there, but we had a great time that day. What a beautiful lighthouse. So I'm going to go into screen sharing here, and I heard somebody say something. Okay, I'm going to screen sharing. I just want to say that at the end of my part of this presentation, I'm going to turn things over to Sally. Let me see here. Okay. All right. So, and speaking of Horton Point Lighthouse, of course, you had a woman keeper there, Stella Prince, and Mary Corpy wrote a really excellent book about her. So I'm not talking about her today. I hope that you've all had a chance. I didn't see if Mary is here today, but anyway, you probably know her and you probably read the book. What's that? What's that, Darren?
She's waving now. You can see her
She's
in the middle.
waving. Oh, okay. I can't see her because I only see my own screen. Hi, Mary. So Mary's been on my podcast. So anyway, if you haven't read her book, you got to read it. So let me get into things here. The hard part for me was getting this into about a half hour to talk about women keepers because there's so much I could talk about. And I will say, starting out, that there's in the history of this country from 1716, when Boston Light was established, first lighthouse on the continent, until Sally Snowman retired as keeper of Boston Light in the end of 2023. There were in the neighborhood, nobody has an exact count, but I believe more than 20,000 male keepers. And that includes Coast Guard keepers. The Coast Guard took over the management of lighthouses from the Civilian Lighthouse Service in 1939. Excuse me, and including them, over 20,000 male keepers, but also over 500 women keepers. So a pretty substantial number of women keepers. And typically what happened in a lot of cases is, if you had a family at a light station, which was most mainland light stations and ones on larger islands had families living at them, and you might have a male head keeper, but the wife or daughter in many cases would learn how to do the job in case the man was detained away or died suddenly or whatever might happen. So you usually had more than one person in the household who could do it. So in a lot of cases, if the man did die or couldn't do the job anymore, the wife or daughter would sometimes get the appointment to be the next keeper. So that's how it happened in most cases. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the first lighthouse keeper, first woman lighthouse keeper on the continent. And before I do, I'll just mention that the picture on the left here, that was at a ceremony in April 2019 in Kingston, Massachusetts, near Plymouth, where this lighthouse is. The group that takes care of the lighthouse ran this event. And on the right is Susan Bolio, who was portraying Hannah Thomas, the country's first woman lighthouse keeper. And of course, that's Sally Snowman on the left, the keeper of Boston Light, the last official keeper, really the last official lighthouse keeper in the country. So you had the first and last women keepers represented there, which was really cool. Plymouth Light is at the end of a long sand spit known as the Gurnet. It's also known as the Gurnet Light. And the lights that's there today is not the original. Originally, in 1768, there was a keeper's house with two lights on the roof. And this is John Thomas. The lighthouse was built on land owned by John and Hannah Thomas, his wife. John Thomas was a doctor from the South Shore of Boston. He became a military surgeon and eventually became a major general in the Army. The government didn't buy the land from the Thomases, which was a little unusual. Instead, they paid the Thomases for the right to build the lighthouse, and John Thomas became the first keeper of the lights. This is not Hannah Thomas in this drawing. Of course, we have no photographs because she was before photography. And as far as I know, we have no drawings or paintings of Hannah Thomas. So I just selected this as kind of a representative image for her. But I don't know if it looks like her or not. But anyway, so in the days leading up to the Revolution, John Thomas recruited a regiment of volunteers from Plymouth County. They fortified Dorchester Heights at Boston and had a lot to do with the British evacuating Boston Harbor after their occupation in 1776. Thomas became a major general, as I said, and led troops at Quebec. Smallpox spread through his troops, and Thomas died of smallpox on June 2nd, 1776. His wife, Hannah, had taken over the duties of keeping the lights at the Gurnet when her husband went to war, along with the responsibilities of raising three children. And I should have mentioned that this document I have on the screen shows that 60 pounds was paid to John Thomas for service as keeper of the lighthouse at the Gurnet. So that was the agreement when they were allowed to build the lighthouse on the Thomases' land. So again, Hannah took over the duties, excuse me, when her husband went to war, also raising three children. And then when her husband died of smallpox, she became the official keeper. She was never actually assigned, from everything I can find, but she kind of inherited the job because of that agreement they had made with the government. a barrack or barracks was built during the revolution. Apparently, the lights at the Gurnet were turned off for a while during the revolution, and a barracks was put there and defended against the British during the revolution. Of course, the lights went back into service at the end of the war. And this document shows that the barracks was given to Hannah Thomas, since it was on her land for her trouble. They actually gave her that. So Hannah was still considered keeper in 1786. That's when this document was written. And in 1786, Hannah hired a local man named Nathaniel Burgess to serve as light keeper, and her son John became the keeper in 1790. So I wish I had more images to show you and more information, but we don't know a whole lot about Hannah Thomas. And again, we have no real images of her. So I'm going to but she was the first woman keeper in the country. So now I want to talk about Kate Moore, a real interesting character. Whoops. Let me go back. One of the oldest lighthouses on Long Island Sound, excuse me, is Fairweather Island Lighthouse at the entrance to Black Rock Harbor, which is now part of Bridgeport. Sorry, I'm running two computers at once, and I keep forgetting which computer I want to want to push the button on. My printer crapped out on me this morning. I couldn't print my notes, so I've got my notes on my laptop in front of me. So I can't talk and press keys at the same time. Anyway, so this is one of the oldest lighthouses on Long Island Sound, and it was in the village of Black Rock, but it's now part of Bridgeport. The first keeper here was Stephen Tomlinson Moore, and he had a daughter, Kate, who learned to trim the wicks and care for the light when she was very young, when she was a girl. And she didn't become the official keeper until much later, but she was doing the job from pretty early on. She, in an interview much later, she described maintaining those early lamps. She said, quote, "During windy nights, it was impossible to keep them burning at all, and I had to stay there all night. But on other nights, I slept at home, dressed in a suit of boy's clothes, my lighted lantern hanging at my headboard, and my face turned so I could see shining on the wall the light from the tower and know if anything happened to it. Our house was 40 rods, which is about 700 feet, from the lighthouse, and to reach it, I had to walk across tow planks under which, on stormy nights, were 4 feet of water, and it was not too easy to stay on those wet, slippery boards with the wind whirling and the spray blinding me," unquote. Excuse me. Her father excuse me. Her father, Keeper Stephen Moore, became disabled after an accident, and Kate took over full duties of the lighthouse as a teenager. Her father remained official keeper until he died in 1871, and that's when Kate got the official appointment, but she was really doing the job long before that. She maintained a garden, cared for a number of animals, including a flock of sheep. She carved and sold duck decoys, had a thriving oyster business with oyster beds around the island, and if an outsider trespassed on our oyster beds, she'd grab her shotgun and tell them, "I represent the United States government, and you've got to go." She was also, she never went to school, but she had a large library in the house and paintings. She was a very cultured woman in spite of not going to school. She was kind of matter of fact about her life. She said, quote, "You see, I had done this for so many years and I knew no other life, so I was sort of fitted for it. I never had much of a childhood as other children have it. That is, I never knew playmates. Mine were the chickens, ducks, and lambs, and my two Newfoundland dogs." At her father's death, Kate, as I said, was appointed keeper. She remained there for 7 more years. And during her years there, she was credited with 21 lives saved. She was there for 62 years in all. There were frequently vessels wrecked nearby in storms, and she said the worst part of the job was recovering the bodies of those who died in wrecks. But she did, as I said, rescue a number of people as well. This clipping on the right is an interview done with her late in her life by the newspaper called the New York World, and that's where we get a lot of our information about her. But I think they had her age wrong. Some sources say that she's 98 in this picture, but I think she's actually 88 and lived to be well into her 90s.
Wow.
So this is the Fairweather Island Lighthouse today with an osprey nest on it. It is cared for by the Black Rock Community Council. The keeper's house burned down accidentally many years ago. And there's a really beautiful children's book about Kate Moore, as you see here. I love this cover. It's one of my all-time favorite covers, Courage Like Kate. It concentrates on the time when she was a young girl caring for the light. Excuse me. I've had Anna Crowley Redding, the author, on my podcast. And on the right, you see the memorial to her in the Black Rock neighborhood, looking out to Fairweather Island. And the Coast Guard also named a cutter for her. The Coast Guard cutter Kathleen Moore, a Sentinel class fast response 154-foot cutter commissioned in 2014. And the cutter's coat of arms features 21 stars for each of the lives she saved. Abby Burgess, or Abby Burgess Grant, is one of the most famous women keepers in our history. Botanicus Rock, you see the early picture here of the Botanicus Rock lights. It's a 32-acre granite island about 25 miles from the nearest port on the mainland, excuse me, which is Rockland in mid-coast Maine. President John Quincy Adams authorized the building of 2 lighthouses here in 1827, and it was considered a very important station for coastal shipping traffic. Samuel Burgess, Abby's father, became keeper in 1853, and he and his invalid wife moved to the station with several of their 10 children. The oldest one had already moved away. The oldest sibling living there was Abby. She was 13 when they moved to the island. She quickly learned how to light the whale oil lamps and perform other duties around Matinicus Rock. Then in January 1856, when Abby was 16, her father left in a sailboat to get supplies. He left Abby alone with her mother, invalid mother, and 2 younger sisters. And he said, "I can depend on you, Abby," as he left the island. A huge storm came into the region soon after that, and the waves grew large. The wind increased. It continued to worsen over the next 3 days. On January 19th, Matinicus Rock was virtually underwater. Abby moved her mother and younger sisters to the North Lighthouse Tower, from the house to the North Lighthouse Tower on higher ground. I have no idea how she did that. 16 years old. And she wrote about it later. She said, quote, "Early in the day, as the tide arose, the sea made a complete breach over the rock, washing every movable thing away. The dwelling was flooded and the windows had to be secured to prevent the violence of the spray from breaking them in," unquote. And she continued, "As the tide came, the sea rose higher and higher till the only endurable places were the light towers. If they stood, we were saved. Otherwise, our fate was only too certain. But for some reason, I know not why, I had no misgivings. Went on with my work as usual," unquote. She waded knee-deep into the water to rescue her pet chickens from their coop. That's what you see in this drawing here. And a short time later, a gigantic wave swept the island and destroyed the keeper's house where they had been. After more than 3 weeks, Samuel Burgess, her father, returned because there was a series of storms and high tide, so he couldn't get back for more than 3 weeks. Very happy to find his family alive and well. Again, in the following year, 1857, he was away. Same thing happened again, away for 3 weeks during a stormy period. The second time, the family's food supply was reduced to 1 egg and a cup of cornmeal mush per day before supplies arrived. So she was really regarded as a national heroine. It's absolutely incredible what she accomplished. Sorry, there we go. Okay. A little trouble with my advancing my notes here. Just bear with me here. So Samuel Burgess lost his job for political reasons. Captain John Grant, a friend of the Burgesses, became the next keeper. Abby helped train him. The new keeper's son, Isaac, who you see in this picture here, developed a romance with Abby, and they were married within a year. And Abby became the official assistant keeper at Matinicus Rock. They had 4 children there, and then Isaac was appointed keeper of Whitehead Light, that you see here in Penobscot Bay, in 1875, and Abby continued as his assistant keeper there. In 1891, and by that time, Abby had some sort of brain disease. It isn't clear if she had a brain tumor, but in any case, a terminal brain disease. Abby wrote, quote, "Sometimes I think the time is not far distant when I shall climb these lighthouse stairs no more. It has almost seemed to me that the light was part of myself. Many nights I have watched the lights, my part of the night, and then could not sleep the rest of the night, thinking nervously what might happen should the lights fail. If I ever have a gravestone, I'd like it to be in the form of a lighthouse or beacon." And she didn't get that at first. She got this little gravestone in the Spruce Head village near there. But in 1947, Edward Rowe Snow, very popular historian from the Boston area, who's the guy on the right here with the dark coat, and Wilbert Snow, no relation, who was a poet from Connecticut, excuse me, they had that little aluminum lighthouse made and put on Abby's grave. Sorry, I'm just going to mute myself for a second. All right, I'm just getting over a cold. So they had this little lighthouse put in her grave in 1947, and I took that picture of it on the right a few years ago. And it's not big, but Abby got her lighthouse, which is a nice thing. And this children's book, Keep the Lights Burning, Abby, is kind of a classic. I believe it's still used in schools, even though it was written quite a few years ago. It was featured in the PBS series Reading Rainbow, if you remember that. I just want to talk briefly about Nancy Rose. She's not as well known as these other women keepers, but amazingly, she was keeper for 47 years. I just find that amazing. There are only a couple of lighthouse keepers I know of in history, male lighthouse keepers, who are at one place longer than that. So she was keeper at Stony Point, New York, on the Hudson River. Her husband, Alexander, had become keeper in 1852. He was carrying lumber and somehow ruptured a blood vessel, is how it was reported. He died a few weeks later, and Nancy became the next keeper. Along with running the light, she was faced with the task of raising 6 children by herself. In August of 1895, the automatic fog bell machinery that had to be cranked every couple of hours in times of fog and malfunctioned. And according to a newspaper, quote, "On one occasion during a dense fog, excuse me, she remained for 56 hours at her post in the cold tower of the lighthouse, ringing the fog bell at regular intervals of half a minute. Here she remained half frozen and without food until the fog had disappeared," unquote. But generally, things were kind of boring, according to Nancy. She said, quote, "Nothing ever happens here." That was in a 1903 article. "One year is exactly like another, and except for the weather, nothing changes," unquote. Her daughter Melinda agreed. She said, "I can't remember anything that has ever happened except once our cow died, and several times it's been bad years for the chickens," unquote. Nancy's son Alexander was asked if he wanted to be lighthouse keeper, and he said, "I'd rather pick huckleberries over the mountain for a living." So I don't think he wanted to be a lighthouse keeper. So, it wasn't for everybody, but also being a keeper at a quiet river light, on the Hudson River like this one, was a very different experience from a busier ocean, lighthouse on the coast, on the ocean. Very different thing. So next I'm going to tell you about Ida Lewis, who is certainly one of the most famous lighthouse keepers in American history. Lime Rock is in Newport Harbor, Rhode Island, on the southern side of the inner harbor. And in 1853, Hosea Lewis was appointed the keeper of the new light there. And I should mention, you see the keeper's house on the right in this old postcard. The light is on the other side of that. It's just a small light mounted on the side of the building. It's not a tall lighthouse because it was an inner harbor light, and the light didn't need to be seen more than a couple of miles. So Hosea Lewis and his wife had a baby girl born in 1842 named Ida Wally Zoridiah Lewis. That was a little unwieldy, so she became known to the world as Ida. In 1857, Hosea suffered a paralyzing stroke. His wife officially became keeper, but right from the start, when she was a young teenager, Ida took over the job of maintaining the light and remained in that position for a few decades. Ida not only tended the light, but she rode her younger brothers and sisters to the mainland every day for school, picked up supplies as they were needed. She was considered the best handler of a dory in Newport, which is saying a lot. And her rowing skill came into play many times during her life there. Officially, she's credited with 18 lives saved, but it's believed the number was probably more like 35 at least. She was very modest, didn't like to talk about her rescues or to really say anything about them. So we don't really know how many people she rescued. Her first rescue was in the fall of 1859 when she was 16. She saw 4 local young men struggling in the water. Their boat had capsized. She went out and rescued them by pulling them into her dory. Imagine pulling somebody by their clothes, basically by their collar, waterlogged clothes, up into your dory. She was small, but she had to be incredibly strong because that's usually how she rescued people. Then in February 1866, 3 soldiers from nearby Fort Adams saw an old skiff that belonged to Ida's brother. They launched it into the water. Alcohol played a role, definitely, in some of these cases. One of the drunken men put his foot right through the floor. The other 2 were never heard from again. The third man drifted in the sinking skiff until Ida arrived and pulled him into her boat. Then in 1867, 3 men were walking along the shore transporting a rare sheep, a valuable sheep that belonged to the Belmont family, one of the rich families in Newport. The sheep suddenly tried to escape. Whoops. Sorry again, I pushed the button on the wrong computer there. Sheep tried to escape. It swam into the water for all it was worth. And I'm sorry, I minimized my screen here on my laptop. Sorry, now all. Okay, here we go. Just give me just a second here. I'm going to keep doing that. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, let me stop. Give me a second to stop and think because like I said, I can't talk and think at the same time. All right. So, I was talking about she rescued those 3 men who were transporting the sheep. After getting them back to the keeper's house, she realized the sheep was still out there. So she actually went out and threw a rope around the sheep and rescued the sheep as well as those 3 men. So just an incredible person. She became nationally known. Poems and songs were written about her. Ida Lewis scarves were sold in stores. She made magazine covers, as you see here, Harper's Weekly, leading periodical of the day. In the 4th of July parade in 1869, they gave her this beautiful dory with gold-plated oarlocks, paraded her through the streets of Newport. President Grant visited her, Susan B. Anthony, among other famous people, and she became really one of the best-known women of late 19th century America. Very modest, again, didn't like all that attention, but very respected lighthouse keeper. For a while, she was actually the highest paid lighthouse keeper, not just woman lighthouse keeper, but the highest paid lighthouse keeper in the country. When she died in 1911, the light was renamed for her, which is the only time in American history I know of that happening. You see that small light in the side of the building there. But later it became the Ida Lewis Yacht Club, which it is today, and they light that light on summer evenings as a tribute to her. So very famous woman, and I'll show you a book about her at the end. This is Kate Walker, who was keeper in New York Harbor for quite a few years. And rather than me talk about her, I'm going to play a little 4-minute video that I made a few years ago about Kate Walker. So here it is.
Kate Walker, who would become one of the most famous lighthouse keepers in the world, was born Catherine Gortler in Germany in 1846. She journeyed to America with a young son after her first husband died. In the early 1880s, she met John Walker, an assistant keeper at the Sandy Hook Light Station in New Jersey at the entrance to New York Harbor. Romance blossomed, and Kate and John were married.
He took me to that lighthouse as his bride. I enjoyed life there, for the light was on land, and we could have a garden and raise flowers.
Kate's world changed dramatically after her husband was appointed keeper at Robbins Reef Lighthouse off the northern tip of Staten Island in New York Harbor. Kate later described her reaction when she and John arrived at their new home.
The day we came, I said to him, "I can't stay here. The sight of water everywhere I look makes me too lonesome." I refused to unpack my trunks, but somehow they got unpacked.
Kate became her husband's official assistant, and she gradually grew accustomed to her new home in the harbor. In 1886, her husband died of pneumonia, and Kate was widowed for the second time at the age of 40. John's last words were, "Mind the light, Kate." She was appointed keeper of the lighthouse after her husband's death.
You have nature and the elements and the best company of all, but quiet. Oh, there were so many things at the lighthouse. It's so funny to hear people call it a lonely place.
Kate Walker stood barely 4'10" with her shoes on. Like so many celebrated keepers, she downplayed the difficulties and isolation of her unique post. When they were young, Kate rode her children, Jake and Mary, to Staten Island so they could attend school. At night, she had to wind the mechanism that rotated the lighthouse lens every 3 hours, so she napped during the afternoon. In winter, it wasn't unusual for Kate to spend the entire night in the lantern, making sure the glass stayed clear of frost. After drinking a cup of coffee delivered by her son at dawn, Kate would go to bed, unless, of course, foggy conditions necessitated the starting of the fog signal.
Even when I am off duty, I wake up every hour in the night to see if the light is all right. You get a thing like that on your mind. The light must be kept burning.
By her own account, Kate saved 50 people from drowning during her years at the lighthouse. But estimates by others range as high as 75. One of the most memorable rescues occurred on a winter night when a schooner crashed into the reef. Kate launched her small boat in heavy seas and rescued all 5 of the crew, bringing them into the lighthouse. When one of the men asked, "Where's Scotty?" Kate rushed back outside to rescue a small Scotty dog. She nursed the dog back to health for the next few days. In a 1909 interview, Kate told the New York Times,
Maintaining this light is more work than running any household or any child.
Kate remained keeper until 1919. She died in 1931 at the age of 84 after a long illness. She will never be forgotten for the long years she served the mariners of New York Harbor, honoring her husband's last request.
We buried him on the mainland over there. Every morning when the sun comes up, I stand at the porthole and look toward his grave. Sometimes the hills are brown, sometimes they are green, sometimes they're white with snow, but always they bring a message from him. Something I heard him say more often than anything else. Just 3 words. Mind the light.
Can hear you from the text. She's on the Joel.
Well, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Sorry about that. I was babbling and you couldn't hear me. But I was just saying my wife, Charlotte, was the voice of Kate Walker in that video. And it was fun to put together. I would say Ida Lewis and Kate Walker, probably the two most famous women lighthouse keepers, certainly in the eastern U.S. Karen McLean, who you see on the left here and on the right in that group, with her husband Dan, was a Coast Guard keeper in Maine. There were several light stations established on Maine's Kennebec River in 1898 because to lead mariners to Bath, a very important shipbuilding city. And in the 1980s, under the Coast Guard, it became the job of one keeper to look after 3 light stations: the Kennebec River Range Lights, and you see the front range in that picture on the left, Doubling Point Light and Squirrel Point Light, and their fog signals. So for a few years, the job was performed by Coast Guard bosun mate Karen McLean, one of a very small number of female Coast Guard lighthouse keepers, and the last one, I believe. And I believe she was the last woman keeper other than Sally Snowman in the country. Karen's husband Dan headed a Coast Guard unit in Boothbay, Maine. He lived at the keeper's house at the Range Lights with their 2 children, and then in February 1987. Dan took charge of the light station, making it the first time in Coast Guard history that a husband relieved a wife of command of the same unit. On the right, that's Dan and Karen, along with Jim and Joyce Spencer. Jim and Joyce have lived in the keeper's house at Doubling Point for a long time. Really nice people, and they spearheaded the restoration of that and preservation of that lighthouse. You can see the lighthouse itself just barely on the left side of that picture in the background. But Karen and Dan have taken over the leadership of the preservation group there. I'm going to play you a quick clip of Karen McLean from my podcast here.
It's definitely been a privilege to have had the opportunity to serve the Coast Guard at a lighthouse, an active lighthouse. And to be able to come full circle after we had our son and daughter born this summer, to have the bonus to see Dan walk that same walkway with our grandson and our granddaughter. It's like our hearts were just melting to have that chance. And the friends that we have met here on Dublin Point and the memories we've created, as the Spencers have said, talking to our guests, learning about, the areas that they come from, and just seeing the joy in their eyes, having an opportunity to visit a lighthouse on the Maine coast. Sharing that with them has also been special.
I'm sorry. Once again, I forgot to unmute myself. Sorry. All right, let me go back here. All right. So I was just want to say a little bit more quickly about daughters and wives at lighthouses. Annie Bell Hobbs was a daughter of an assistant keeper at Boone Island. Boone Island is about 7 miles off the coast of southern Maine. And she, at the age of 14, she wrote an article for a children's magazine called Nursery. I'm not going to read you the whole article. She's not in this picture, by the way. There's some family groups there, but she's not in that picture, but just kind of representative of families there. It's hard to believe that families lived on that little pile of rocks all year round for quite a few years. So I love the way Annie started the article she wrote. She said, "I've lived the past 3 years on Boone Island, where I am prisoner of the yard." In other words, she felt like she was in prison, although she could at least go out on the rocks. But it was just her and her brother, little brother, and they were homeschooled. They would go months at a time without seeing other kids. If somebody showed up on the island and wanted a tour of the lighthouse, it was her job to give them a tour. She might get a penny or a nickel if she was lucky for doing that. 176 stairs to the top. But she ended the article by saying something like, "Night after night, my father and the other keepers keep watch so the poor sailors might be warned away from danger." And you get the feeling that she really appreciated why they were there. But I don't think you could get many 14-year-olds to put up with life in a place like that these days. And finally, Connie Small wrote a book, The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife, when she was 85 years old. Wonderful person. She was married to Elson Small. You see them on the left in the 1930s, I think that picture was taken. And they lived at Maine lighthouses mostly for almost 30 years, finished their career at Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse in New Hampshire. The book, The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife, is just a great account of lighthouse life in the first half of the 20th century. She really was an assistant keeper, even though she wasn't paid for it. And I got to know Connie quite well later in her life. She died at 103 in 2005. And I had the pleasure of introducing Connie and Sally Snowman to each other. And that's the picture you see there. Sally gave Connie her book on Boston Light. And it was nice to be able to be part of that. So just a little bit of reading. I suggest Women Who Kept the Lights by Mary Louise and Candace Clifford. Kind of the first book about women keepers, very extensive, and recommend it very highly. Guiding Lights on the right there by Shauna Riddell. She's in New Zealand, and it's a wonderful book, not just about women keepers around the world, but about women living at lighthouses in general. Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter is the best book about Ida Lewis by Lenore Scommel. And again, The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife. So those are some suggestions for reading for you. And I'll just finish by saying I'm the historian for the U.S. Lighthouse Society. That's my day job, uslhs.org. And the Lighthouse Research Catalog You can get into it through the front page of the website or go to archives.uslhs.org. It's the largest repository of lighthouse materials, except I think for the National Archives, but we're catching up. There's tons of material on there, hundreds of thousands of files, pictures, and documents. You can look up a keeper and often find their personnel records and different things about them. So I just wanted to mention that as well. So what I'm going to do now is come out of screen sharing, and I know Sally's going to do an introduction for a film we're going to show. But let me get out of screen sharing first here, and I'm going to introduce Sally. Sally, I've known Sally for more than 30 years, since before she was a lighthouse keeper. Sally's from Boston's South Shore. She joined the Coast Guard Auxiliary after college. She always loved Boston Light. In 2003, she was named keeper. First civilian keeper of Boston Light since 1941. First woman keeper in Boston Light's history, going back to 1716. She retired after 20 years at the end of 2023, and that ended 3 centuries of American lighthouse keepers. She was the last official keeper in the country. And I should mention that Sally married her husband, Jay Thompson, who's probably around there somewhere. I don't see him. But there he is. He's waving to us. And they were married at Boston Light. So, it's meant a lot to her, obviously. So you can go ahead, Sally.
I'm sure I'm being careful
you're
to make
unmuted.
sure that I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Wow, Jeremy, that's amazing program you put together. Amazing. Thank you. And for me, typically when my husband and I go on out on tours to give Boston Light history, we have a PowerPoint presentation and we just talk off the PowerPoint. This one is so different. I've never done this. So it's interesting that Jeremy had some issues. So I'm probably going to have some too. So just bear with us, please. I never read anything, but because of this is such a different venue that I'm using, I am going to probably read most of it. And there's 2 aspects to me as the keeper of Boston Light. The one is being the keeper. And the second one is that I am a deeply spiritual person, and I've been doing studies for decades in this whole esoteric piece of things. And so for me to be weaving in these 2, that's what the film's going to be about. It's only 13 minutes long, and it's getting into that spiritual aspect. So I'm going to give you a little bit about what it was like to be the keeper of Boston Light, the first and the last. The first keeper out there at Boston Light was in 1716, and there have been 70 keepers. I'm the 70th, and the first 69 were all men. So I'm the first female keeper of Boston Light, and also the last, bringing closure to 307 years of Boston Light being out in the harbor, shining that light in the fog signal, minus 7 years of the Revolutionary War. So that's why I'm saying I'm the first and the last, and it's very, very humbling. And so the first aspect is about what did I do in the 21st century lighthouse keeping, because Boston Light is the last one, and that was manned. So now it's unmanned, or I jokingly say unwomaned, and because it's automated. The light flashes 24/7. The fog signal kicks in. It's when the luminosity drops. And the only reason why we still had a keeper out of Boston Light, because it was the first established lighthouse in our country, before our country, before the Revolutionary War. So it's been a pinnacle piece of our maritime history. So when the Coast Guard were having the lighthouses no longer manned, and the last one was going to be Boston Light in 1989. It never happened. And now we're in 2026, and now there is no keeper out there. And with all that history that goes with it, with having me being now the first female in all those 307 years and bringing that closure is very, very humbling to me. And what my responsibilities was, well, because it's all automated, what did I do? Well, it's an island, and it's only 1.5 acre at high tide, 3 acres at low tide. And there's no dock out there. There's a pier, but not a dock. So there was this whole piece of the Park Service wanting to have tours on the island. So not only was I being the supervisor of the island and maintaining the lawn and the routine things that you do at home, but we're doing it on an island, which makes it more challenging. How do you get your fresh water out there? So forth and so on. And the reason why my position is what we call a civilian. We have the Coast Guard and the reservists. But after 9/11, the Coast Guard said, we can't afford to have active duty out on that. We need them for port security. And so they went to Congress, and sure enough, they said, okay, you can hire a civilian keeper. And as a Coast Guard auxiliarist member for decades, and the love of the water and my experiences with the water and at a Boston Light prior to all of this, I was the one that was hired. And it was for just a 1.5 or 2 years until a tour or a transfer was going to be done to the Park Service. To this day, we're still waiting for that transfer to happen, but it hasn't. We're not going to talk about that because what this session is about is the women keepers. So we're going to move along. So what did I do? Needing to recruit Coast Guard auxiliary volunteers, approximately 80 a year, to train them, assign them to them, get them out to the island on my own personal boat. And then all the maintaining, as I mentioned before, whatever you do at home, you're going to be doing it at a lighthouse as well. And so I was out there during the months of April through October. And then in the winter time, I would be homebound. So people would say, wow, what's Sally doing? I mean, she's on the Coast Guard payroll. What is she doing? Well, we prepare for the next season. That's when we do the recruiting, the training, and there's a lot of paperwork to being a lighthouse keeper. Oh my gosh, the records that have to be kept, and all the different engineers from the Coast Guard base coming out and making sure that that is all logged in. And so for my job on the mainland, all I did was catch up with what I didn't get from April to October, and at the same time revving up for the next season. So it was more than a 40-hour job. And as a Coast Guard auxiliary volunteer, I had to be careful as to when I was on the payroll and when I was the volunteer. So I figured it out that usually when you get paid for a job in this country, it's 2,000 hours. I was doing 4,000 hours for Boston Light for the 20 years that I was out there. And the reason why I'm wearing this costume is because when the Coast Guard appointed a civilian keeper out of Boston Light, I was not to wear the Coast Guard uniform. And now in the video you're going to see, you will see me in blue clothing. And that was with our auxiliary uniform, which is pretty close to the active duty reserves. But when I was out with the public, I didn't want them to recognize me because I didn't want to be known on the street when I was in the grocery store or the restaurants. So this costume has served me and it continues to serve me, following in the footsteps of the women that Jerry mentioned, that we're humble. This is what we do, and we just do it. And so with that, the unmanning of Boston Light was on the 31st of December in 2023, bringing closure. So I am the last one, the last keeper in the United States. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeremy, and he's going to do the 13-minute film, and then we're going to have some Q&A. So with that, Jeremy.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So again, the film is about 13 minutes. I just saw it for the first time a few days ago, and I love it. I think you're all going to enjoy it. So let me go into full screen here and start the video. There is no sound at the beginning.
The energy of the island spoke to me. When I was 10, I stepped on the island, I looked up at the tower and said, Daddy, when I grow up, I want to do that. I knew that at 10 years old. We're just light in this body. My soul and my connection to that greater soul, to that spirit, that's forever. That's eternal. My purpose is being here on the island, working the energies one person at a time, one seagull at a time, one muskrat at a time. I've had too many losses, too many bad relationships. I just wasn't getting it right. I felt that I was not worthy for the space I was taking up on the planet. I just wanted to relieve my parents from having to worry about me, because they didn't know how to help me. I got to this point where I either had to depart the planet or figure out how to move on. And I figured out how to move on. What makes your heart sing? What brings you joy? And that's the light. When we can find that space and become that rotating beam of light of 2 million candle power. And, I still have really tough times. We all do. And I have to keep on coming back. You're here for a reason. Figure out what it is. This is the island's bird bathtub. They poop in it. It's disgusting. When I came out to Boston Light for our first watch, when I was going up the stairs, I felt like I had done it 1,000 times before. The keeper that was out there after the Revolutionary War, he was Thomas Knox, and his wife's name was Content. I really feel I was content going up those stairs. I had done it 1,000 times before. What did Content wear out here in 1783? And that's where I came up with the costume and the bonnet. When I wear it, I turn into Content Knox. But it puts me in the energy of Boston Light. And I was always fascinated by ghosts, because I saw things. So the ghosts were not scary to me. I just wanted to know what was this stuff that I was sensing and feeling. What a beautiful closure to all of this. My dream was to be the keeper out here, and I am. So for me, I am so honored. This is the last manned light station in the country. So now it's womaned, and my work is done. We're connected forever. This was all planned sometime back when I was 10 years old. This is Light Station Boston. We're packing up. We'll be ready to go in about 15 minutes. Over.
Roger that. We're heading back there now.
Light Station Boston out.
I'll let it play to the end of the credits. Okay. So at this point, we can open it up for questions for either of us. And I just love that film so much. It's like poetry. It's I think it's quite moving. So anyway, any questions from anybody for either of us? And it's a little hard for us to hear, so please, when you ask your question, please speak up.
I have one, Jeremy. Could you speak to the compensation levels of the women keepers? Did they receive the same compensation as men?
Type salary levels for keepers. It's almost like a bad cell phone connection where it's like cutting in and out the sound we're hearing.
Hi, Jeremy. Darren, I'm here. I know you can't see me. I'm
Okay.
just in the audience, but I'll try to repeat the question. We were just curious about, the salary of women lighthouse keepers to men lighthouse keepers.
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned that it's amazing to me that Ida Lewis, who, became a nationally known heroine during her lifetime, was actually the highest paid lighthouse keeper in the country, even though it was an inner harbor light and it was a relatively small light. But, it was in recognition of the life she saved and everything. But overall, I believe that women keepers in that era, in the 1800s, early 1900s, were paid the same as men. I mean, if they were a head keeper, they were paid the same salary that a male head or principal keeper would have had. And if they're an assistant, the same as a male assistant, which was not great. You didn't get rich being a lighthouse keeper. Typically, like a mainland station or a larger island station, like in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the pay was about $500 a year. If you were out in a place like Boone Island, a more isolated place, or Matinicus Rock, it might have been $850 a year, which was considered pretty good at the time. Money went a little farther than it does now, but it was never a big salary. You got a place to live, and you got some of your supplies in a lot of cases, but you didn't get rich being a lighthouse keeper. So it did gradually go up during the 20th century. And under the Coast Guard, it was Sally might be able to speak better to that as far as the Coast Guard salary. But in addition to their regular Coast Guard salary, they got a stipend for groceries. And I've heard Coast Guard keepers talk about how they would save that money and not spend much. But you live on some of them like peanut butter sandwiches, then save the money. And when they had their off time in town, spend it then. But anyway, but even under the Coast Guard too, it wasn't something you made a lot of money at. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes.
Anybody else?
There were just male lighthouse keepers, and they can only be married for a woman to be in the lighthouse. So
No.
they stood with the men. Did they get paid separately from the husband?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. I don't think they would have combined. I don't think it'd be paid separately. But I should mention that, as I said, most women keepers were wives or daughters of keepers, and then when the male keeper couldn't do the job anymore for one reason or another, some of them got the job. But there's a couple of cases where women were appointed outright as keepers. It was pretty rare. I know there was a woman, I think in Salem, Mass, Baker's Island, named Jane Martin, who had some background, as an assistant before then. It got assigned a head keeper. So it happened a couple of times, but it was rare. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question exactly. But
No, from what I've read, though, generally it was a man, and he could only have a woman there if he was married.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Some of that kind of cut out for me. I didn't hear the last part of what you said.
You answered it.
Okay. I was just going to add, I know there was a lighthouse. It was Boone Island, actually. There was a longtime keeper there in the early 1800s lighthouse keeping was very political. And if you didn't support the right political person, you could lose your job. So I think that's why he lost his job. But they said things about him in the newspapers, like they said he was living with his wife's sister out on the island. That's part of why he got fired. I'm not quite sure if it was true or not. Maybe it was. But anyway, but that was definitely a no-no.
And did they get their supplies delivered, or did they go out to the mainland to get supplies?
That varied over the years, and also depending on where you were. If you were at some of these lights, like if any of you are familiar with Minot's Light off the South Shore of Boston, or Graves Light in Boston Harbor, these granite towers where keepers would often be stuck for long periods of time without being able to leave. There would be lighthouse tenders, the boats that brought supplies periodically. In some cases, water they would pump into a cistern. and various food supplies. If you lived on the mainland, you're responsible for getting your own food, and most of the island lights as well. So it depended on how isolated you were, and so that's pretty much it. Yeah.
We have another question from Mary, and if anybody on Zoom has a question, please just type it into the chat, and we'll relay those over to the team.
Sally, steps, I didn't quite pick it up, and for the lighthouse, and how often did you go up and down in a day?
Could you hear that, Sally?
She's muted, I think.
No, I didn't hear
She
it.
asked how many times a day did you go up and down the stairs of the lighthouse?
Well, the Park Service started bringing tours out in 1999, before I was on the payroll. However, I was involved in all that piece of it. So when I became the keeper and the visitors would come, it would be amazing how many people would get 2/3 of the way up the tower and start freaking out a bit. So sometimes I'd be up and down those stairs 5, 6 times a day. And then during the other days, Monday through Thursday were our work days. That's when we just cleaned everything on the island and what have you. And probably 2 or 3 times a day.
Sally, do you remember how many steps there were?
76 spiral stairs, and then a ladder to go into the gear room, and then another level more stairs or ladder to get into the lantern room.
Thank you.
And very often during tours, that was in her costume dress.
Oh, I was always on my costume.
Yeah.
If I knew people were coming to the island, I put the costume on. Yeah. And I can move quite quickly up the stairs, holding my breath up.
Uh-huh.
We have another question.
Yeah, a quick question. Jeremy, hi, it's Mia from Montauk Point Lighthouse. I just going back to this notion of female keepers and keepers being paid. My impression always was that there was a preference for male lighthouse keepers who were married because they got a little bit of additional and unpaid help, because I think a lot of the wives and daughters weren't official assistants, right? They were
Right. Most of them were not official assistants. Yeah.
Right.
Is
So,
that Mia? I missed when you started talking.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Hi, Mia. Nice to hear from you. Yeah, and yet another person who's been on my podcast.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely. They preferred married keepers. I think there were a lot of times when, if it was a larger station, like say Boone Island would be one where they had 3 keepers. Thatcher Island off Rockport, Mass, sometimes had as many as 5 keepers. If it was like a new assistant keeper on a place like that, some of them were single. But principal keepers certainly were expected to be married, and I think it was a problem if they weren't. It would be very rare to have an unmarried principal keeper. But of course, at the more isolated stations, like the ones I mentioned, Minot's Light, Graves Light, those were stag stations, males only. So the families lived on shore. Some of them had shore stations, like Minot's Light had 2 houses on shore where the families lived. But the ones where they could have a decent place to live, they were absolutely expected to be married. Yeah.
I'd like to jump in here. At Boston Light in the 1920s and 30s, there were 3 keepers, the principal keeper and then 2 assistant keepers. So the principal keeper had its own house, and then there was a duplex. And at that time, they had 3 keepers, 3 wives, and 19 kids on a 1.5 acre island at high tide.
Don't forget the duplex outhouse and the single outhouse until the 60s.
Sadly, the duplex house is gone now. It was destroyed in the early 1960s. But Sally, were you there in 1991 when I organized a reunion of some of the families, the Norwoods and Babcocks and Jennings out there? Some of those people you just talked about. That was in 91.
No, I was not.
Yeah, that was a nice day. Yeah.
But in researching we got quite friendly with the Norwood family. And they weren't, this story about the daughter is
Storm
an
child.
interesting one to pick up on.
Yeah. Should I tell a real quick version of that? It's sort of, I talk about it in my lectures a lot. 1932, I think that's right. In the spring, Josephine Norwood, wife of the keeper at Boston Lightkeeper and Ralph Norwood, was expecting, and it appeared that she went into labor. They called a doctor from the mainland, from the town of Hull. There was a big storm going on, so he couldn't land his boat, so he went back to Hull. Turned out to be false labor. The baby was born a week later in calm weather. But because the doctor went out there in a storm, it made the headlines, and they called the baby Storm Child, Georgia Norwood. And when she was about 5 years old, a novelist wrote a novel about her called Storm Child. And Hollywood people thought they'd make a movie out of it. She was going to play herself. But at the last minute, she supposedly was crying and said, "I want to stay at Boston Light." They didn't make the movie. And I always wonder whatever happened to that script. But anyway, but it's a neat story. There's a book by Willie Emerson, who was the grandson of Keeper Ralph Norwood. He was the Storm Child's son. Willie Emerson, he wrote a book called First Light about the family's life there, which is real hard to find now. But if you can find a copy of that book, it's really good.
Any other questions? All right, then. Thank you, Jeremy, Sally. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, everybody. All right.
Yeah. Oh no, they can see you. I didn't leave it up. You didn't have to stare at yourselves this whole time. But they can see you. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. And desserts are served. Help yourselves.
We'll be there in a minute for the desserts. I wish.
Hey.
All right. Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Jeremy, Sally, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How do we get out?